Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Hope is Kindled, coming to you from the foot of Bear Mountain in New York. Oscar Wilde once wrote, "To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, that is all." That insight resonates deeply as I sit here, in the very place where Jack Kerouac's On the Road begins, ready to talk about a book that inspired so many of us to truly live, not just exist. In today's episode, we'll journey through Kerouac's classic novel On the Road, exploring how it kindled hope and wanderlust in young readers, myself included, and examining its literary and cultural echoes from the mad friendship at its core to parallels with Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray to the wide-open American highways that beckoned. The Beat generation will reflect on what it means to chase big dreams, cherish true friendship, and keep moving forward. The Call of the Open Road inspiration for a generation on the road isn't just a novel, it's a call to adventure that has electrified readers for decades. Published in 1957, Kerouac's free-spirited narrative became a beacon for young people yearning to expand their horizons. Sal Paradise, Kerouac's alter ego, sets out with $1.50 in his pocket, hitchhiking into the unknown. For readers, especially the young and restless, this was revelatory. Mark Twain's famous adage comes to mind here: travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, a reminder that venturing beyond our little corner of the world broadens our minds immeasurably. On the Road gave permission to do just that. Countless individuals have felt that spark of inspiration, as one modern reader confessed. It was this book that set me on the road, inspired by Jack's philosophy. I bought plane tickets. I set out to see life. I, as poor old Jack, promised. This novel dared ordinary kids to break free from routine and see the world, to follow highways west into sunsets. Chasing something as ambiguous yet vital as freedom. It's hard to overstate how liberating this felt to a teenager cracking open Kerouac's Restless prose for the first time. Sitting here in Kerouac's footsteps at Bear Mountain, a wooded summit overlooking the Hudson River, I recall how my journey with this book began. I grew up not far from this very spot, dreaming of far-off places, but never imagining I'd actually go. Then one day, my friend Sharon pressed a copy of On the Road into my hands. That moment felt like the start of an adventure and a friendship reborn. C.S. Lewis captured it perfectly. Friendship is bored at the moment when one person says to another, "What, you too? I thought I was the only one on the road." Kindled our hope that there was more to life than the everyday. Back beyond the New Jersey skyline lay everything ahead of me, as Sal says, vast and waiting to be explored. It's no coincidence I'm recording at Bear Mountain and On the Road. This is where Sal Paradise's first cross-country trip truly begins, right here on Route 6, heading west. In July 1947, Sal hitchhiking out of New York and gets stuck on Bear Mountain in a rainstorm, cursing himself for being a fool. I can picture him on that winding road, drenched and hopeful. Come out to passing cars. There's a kind of poetic symmetry in that scene. The journey opens with struggle and doubt, yet he perseveres. I look out now at the Bear Mountain Bridge in the distance and imagine Kerouac himself, notebook in hand, scribbling down observations in the mist. This humble mountain became a launch pad for a grand adventure, and for me, a lifelong metaphor. How often do our own adventures start with false starts and nervous, rain-soaked moments? Sal's misadventure here teaches an early lesson: every journey worth taking begins with a leap of faith. Even if the first steps are uncertain, as Colin Powell once quipped, always focus on the front windshield and not the rearview mirror. In other words, don't look back when you're at the starting line of something new. Sal ultimately shakes off his Bear Mountain blues, catches a ride, and presses Cropper on likewise. I recall sitting right here as a teenager, reading that passage and feeling the first prickle of go fever. The sense that I, too, could venture beyond the familiar Bear Mountain became more than a location quote. It was a threshold. On one side lay comfort, and home on the other. The wild promise of the unknown. If I just kept my eyes through the windshield, on the road ahead, I might ignite hope out of my teenage melancholy and find the wide world Kerouac had hinted was out there. At the heart of On the Road is an extraordinarily frustrating friendship between Sal Paradise and Dean Moriarty. Sal describes meeting Dean as the moment the part of my life on the road began. Dean crashes into Sal's life like a comet, frenetic, hyper, and full of ideas, and nothing is ever the same. Sal is immediately drawn to Dean's energy. Why? Because Dean is the embodiment of everything Sal yearns for: freedom, madness, raw life. Sal famously says, "The only people for me are the mad ones. The ones who are mad to live, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles." Dean Moriarty is exactly such a mad one, burning with zeal and insatiable appetite for experience through Sal's eyes. Dean is a charismatic cowboy of the post-war road, a Western kinsman born on the move, literally born during his parents' road trip. As Sal notes, their friendship is intense and intoxicating. Reading it as a young person, you can't help but envy their bond. The way they carry him across the country, laughing, philosophizing, and turning mundane moments into legend. It's a bromance of mythic proportions, at least at first glance. Yet as I've grown older and reread the book many times, I've come to view Sal's affection for Dean with a more critical eye. True friendship is a two-way street, and in many ways, Sal's devotion to Dean is painfully one-sided. Sal adores Dean, calling him a long-lost brother and praising his exuberance and uneducated brilliance. But what does Dean give Sal in return? Adventure, yes, but also chaos and heartbreak. Over the course of On the Road, Dean often disappoints or even betrays Sal. He strands Sal in Mexico when Sal falls ill, running off to pursue his own whims. He shows up in New York at the end, a broken shell of himself, only to be left behind. As Sal moves on with a new life, the final image of Dean and the novel, standing alone on a New York street corner in a cold drizzle as Sal drives away, is haunting. Sal realizes that his long-lost brother was, in many ways, a fair-weather friend. Have you ever had a friend you idolized? Someone who shone so bright that you overlooked their flaws only to be let down? It's a bittersweet lesson, and one Kerouac lived himself. Dean is based on Kerouac's real friend Neil Casati, who similarly charmed and hurt those around him. The novel doesn't sugarcoat the fallout of Dean's manic lifestyle. We, along with Sal, experience the hangover after the wild party, the loneliness of having loved a friend who ultimately couldn't reciprocate dependability or care in the same measure. The dynamic between Sal and Dean reminds me of another famous literary friendship, one tinged with affection and tragedy, from Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. In Wilde's novel, an artist named Basil Hallward becomes entranced by the charming, youthful Dorian Gray. Much as Sal is entranced by Dean, Basil sees idealized beauty in Dorian and pours his soul into a portrait of him. Just as Sal sees epic heroism in Dean and pours his time and trust into him. But Dorian, under the influence of the cynical Lord Henry Wharton, turns down a dark path of selfish hedonism. Eventually, Basil's adoration for Dorian is met with betrayal. Dorian destroys the very friend who loved him most. Now, On the Road doesn't go that far. Dean doesn't murder Sal, thankfully, but the emotional undertones echo. Wild story, one friend who gives unconditional admiration, and the other who, consumed by his own hunger, fails to value that devotion. Saladin versus Basil. Dorian. In both pairs, the worshipper is left heartbroken by the actions of the worshipped. Sal may not meet Basil's gruesome end, but he ends the novel emotionally bruised. Having finally seen that Dean's glorious flame burns people in its orbit, Wilde's warning that there is no such thing as a good influence might apply here. Dean's influence on Sal is exhilarating, but also damaging. Just as Lord Henry's influence poisons Dorian, we can even draw a parallel between Dean. Carlo Marx Carlo as Sal and Dean's poet friend, based on Allen Ginsberg and Dorian Lord Henry and Dorian Gray. Lord Henry is the charming tempter, whispering seductive ideas in Dorian's ear, encouraging him to pursue every pleasure with no regard for morality or others. In On the Road, Dean Moriarty and Carlo Marx spend nights in feverish conversation, talking non-stop about writing and poetry and madness. Kalo, The Ginsberg figure is an intellectual and perhaps even a romantic companion to Dean's wild mind together. They push the boundaries of experience, often fueled by Benzedrine and endless jazz. One could say, Carlo is to Dean what Lord Henry was to Dorian, a co-conspirator who amplifies his excesses. But here's the twist in Kerouac's real-life circle. It was Dean Neil Casati who was often the instigator, egging on the poets to live faster and crazier. So maybe Dean is both Dorian and Lord Henry rolled into one, both the beautiful reckless youth and the charismatic corrupter. Either way, these literary comparisons underscore a theme. Manic personalities can be magnetic, drawing others like moths to a flame, but the aftermath can be devastating. Sal's misplaced affection, loving Dean beyond reason, is akin to Basil Howard's misplaced faith in Dorian's goodness. In both cases, the mad ones leave a trail of hurt behind their brilliance. As Anatole France once observed, wandering reestablishes the original harmony which once existed between man and the universe. Yet for all Dean's wandering and searching for harmony, he creates a lot of discord in his friends' lives. It's a poignant reminder that the people who yell "live life to the fullest" can also break your heart if you're not careful. And still, we can't help but love de Moriarty a little, can we? Kerouac writes him so that we see why Sal and Carlo and Marilou and everyone is drawn in. Dean's mania is infectious. He's the guy who drives 100 miles per hour to see the sunrise, who dances to jazz until sweat soaks his shirt, who talks about life with the urgency of a man starved for meaning. His philosophy is pure carpe diem. Seize the day. In Dean's world, now is the only time, and more is the only speed. This reflects a post-war hunger for meaning after World War II, and in the button-down 1950, here comes a character defiantly alive. It's no wonder young readers like me, like so many, found him thrilling. He embodies that dream of being unshackled by convention. But the novel also serves as a caution. Living purely for the moment can burn you out. Dean burns through marriages, friendships, and finally burns himself out to the point that by the end, he's ragged and mentally scattered. The friendship of Salon Dean, then, is both an inspiration and a warning. Treasure those electrifying friends who open new worlds for you, the ones who get you mad to live, but also know when to step back if your own identity or well-being is at risk. In my youth, I sought out Dean Moriarty, or too drawn by their charisma, only to learn that real friendship needs balance and reciprocity. Perhaps the greatest tribute Sal pays Dean is in writing his story, turning his flawed friend into a kind of legend, but also coming to peace with the fact that legends aren't always meant to stay in our lives forever. Kerouac's famous quote, "The only people for me are the mad ones mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved," didn't just define a character, it defined a generation. The Beat Generation writers Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs, and others in the 1950s adopted an anti-conformist stance that paved the way for the 1960s counterculture. They were called Beat, in part to signify being beaten down, but also beatific, seeking spiritual exaltation. This movement found a natural home in places like San Francisco's North Beach, where City Lights Bookstore, founded by poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti, published beat literature and hosted readings of now classics, like Ginsberg's Howl, by the late 1960s eyes. When young people flocked to San Francisco for the summer of love, you could feel Kerouac's legacy in the air. The hippies of Haight-Ashbury inherited the Beat's quest for authenticity and spiritual freedom, though with more flowers and detours added to the mix. In fact, many of those 60s youth had grown up devouring On the Road, the novel's passionate embrace of personal freedom, rejection of materialism, and exploration of Eastern philosophies. Kerouac was interested in Buddhism, flowed straight into the hippie ethos a decade later. It's fascinating to note how the Beats and the later counterculture also drew inspiration from global figures of peace and protest. For example, Mahatma Gandhi's teachings of nonviolent resistance and simple living influenced numerous 60s leaders and thinkers, from civil rights activists to musicians. The idea that one could resist mainstream expectations and seek a higher truth was common to both Gandhi and the Beats, albeit in very different arenas. Gandhi was, in a sense, a countercultural figure in his own context. colonial India using spiritual conviction to challenge an empire in the 60s. His example fueled the peace movement and even the gentle side of the hippie dream. The emphasis on love, nonviolence, community. While Kerouac's Dean is about as far from Gandhi's ascetic discipline as one can get, they shared a skepticism of the status quo and a belief in following one's inner voice. The 1960s counterculture, with its psychedelic music festivals, anti-war protests, and communal experiments, was a direct descendant of the beat rebellion that, on the road, helped spark. We could easily spin off into an entire series about the music, art, and political upheavals of the 1960s that radiated from these ideas. Indeed, Hope is Kindled might one day venture down that road from the folk anthems of Bob Dylan, a beat devotee, to the psychedelic rock of the Grateful Dead in San Francisco. From the civil rights marches influenced by Gandhi and King to the Back to the Land communes. The counterculture was vast and multifaceted. Each of those threads, whether the location's Greenwich Village, Haight-Ashbury, Woodstock, or the icon's Allen Ginsberg at the Human Ben, or Timothy Leary urging people to turn on, tune in, drop out, could fill episodes on their own. I acknowledge we're only scratching the surface here. Remember, we do not want to break the work down to an academic husk. However, there is a lot that comes into play that is very apropos. The counterculture of the 60s, its music and its legendary locales could be a series in and of itself, but it's important to see how Jack Kerouac's On the Road lies at the root of much of that cultural shift. It gave permission to ask questions and to seek. Steve Jobs famously ended his speeches with the credo, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," a phrase that perfectly captures the on-the-road spirit. It's no accident. Jobs also celebrated the crazy ones in his famous Apple ad campaign, sounding so much like Kerouac's Mad Ones. The beats stayed hungry for meaning and foolish in the eyes of straight society, and thus they changed how countless people view a well-lived life. Let's turn our gaze to the horizon. Literally. One of the most stirring aspects of On the Road is its love affair with the American landscape. Kerouac's prose practically vibrates with the scenery. He crosses the golden fields of Nebraska, the mountains of Colorado, the saguaro-studded deserts of Arizona, the foggy bays of San Francisco. Reading it planted vivid images in my mind long before I ever traveled beyond the East Coast. Kerouac wrote, "The road is life, and you feel that as Salon Dean. Drive beneath ever-changing skies. They barrel through Montana, awed by the big sky that seems to open up a new kind of freedom. They sleep under stars on the high plains of South Dakota, but get lost in the lush timberlands of Oregon, ride gambling, highs in neon Nevada, and stand speechless at the beauty of California's Pacific coast. These places seemed almost mythical to a kid from New Jersey, but I'm grateful to say I've since seen some of them with my own eyes. And let me tell you, the reality more than lives up to the dream. Crossing America by road is something I think every seeker soul should do at least once. There is a humbling grandeur to this country's expanse. I remember driving through Wyoming at twilight, somewhere north of Sheridan, purple mountains silhouetted against a pink sky, and feeling like I was inside a Kerouac paragraph. I pulled over. The silence was near absolute. Not another car or person in sight. Just me. In On the Road so often pauses to just feel the land. Watching dawn break over the Rockies, or listening to night. Insects on a prairie. I did the same in Northern California. I recall a day hiking under a blue dome of sky so vast it made my heart ache. A kind of joyous ache that Kerouac so often described when faced with natural beauty. In Arizona, I wandered in the cactus forests, the heat playing mirages on the highway ahead, understanding what Sal meant by the white sun of the American desert. I drove along Route 1 with the Pacific glinting to my left, hearing jazz in my head and imagining Dean Moriarty at the wheel of a 49 Hudson roaring around those curves. Last year, the boys and I took such a journey. We escaped from Alcatraz, we passed through the Dragon's Gate in Chinatown, and we crossed over the Golden Gate, leaving San Francisco behind. We drove along the Avenue of the Giants to Eureka, up and over the mountains of Northern California to Grants Pass, finding temporary solace beneath bona fide titans in the redwoods. we passed through terrain ravaged by wildfires and blanketed in thick layers of fog and smoke. We were tourist trapped by Bill Cipher and Confusion Hill, and we wandered the trees of mystery. We took inspiration from the bohemians, beatniks, and merry pranksters along the way. We stopped in Castle Rock and at the Oregon State Hospital where, much like Chief Bromden before us, we concluded that our own worst enemies came from within, those telling us we couldn't do things, those telling us to let our fears dictate the paths we would take, and we ignored them, we pressed forward. At the end of our journey, we collapsed on Cannon Beach in Oregon as the sun was setting behind Haystack Rock and cried, "By the grace of God, we came to a place that felt like home." It was a very special experience that everyone should have at some point in their lives. The open road, as depicted by Kerouac, is not just a physical space, but a spiritual one. It's where you confront yourself as much as the world. There's a line by Albert Einstein that rings true here. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving on those long drives. Sometimes I felt I was chasing something, or maybe outrunning something, and that motion itself brought clarity. Movement can be meditation. When you're cruising on an empty highway with 300 miles ahead to the next town, you have a lot of time to think and to absorb. The mountains, the sky, the road, they become a mirror. Kerouac captured that reflective quality of travel so well. His characters aren't just sightseeing, they are soul-searching. And the vastness of the West especially provides a kind of echo chamber for one's thoughts. The clouds over South Dakota's Badlands, 2 stars over Nevada's desert. They make Sal and Dean and us readers feel simultaneously insignificant and deeply connected to everything. It's a paradox of travel. You feel tiny in the face of nature's scale, yet you also feel immersed in a grand tapestry, part of something universal. Anatole France's words come back to mind. Wandering reestablishes the original harmony between man and the universe. I felt that harmony on the road, just as Sal did. It's a theme that hope is kindled. Kerouac cares a lot about finding hope and meaning in our connection to the wider world. When I was younger, I thought hope lay in arrival and reaching some destination where life would magically make sense. But on the road taught me that hope is actually in the journey itself. Every mile is a chance to learn or to see something new. Jack London, another great adventurer writer, once wrote, "The proper function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. I end in." That ethos of living fully vibrates through Kerouac's writing. It nudges us to get off the couch and hit the road, literally or figuratively, to use our time and discovery and pursuit of what makes us feel alive. I want to share a personal anecdote here that ties together the threads of travel, friendship, and generations. A few days before my mother died, she shared her belief that it was better for us to go out and experience life, see the world as a family. She encouraged me to go and make memories with my boys, like the ones I described earlier. She shared a picture from a magazine with a family sitting around a campfire with a car and a camper trailer in the background. In that moment, my mom stopped being just mom and became a fellow traveler, a kindred spirit from another time. It was profoundly moving, a real what, you two revelation. Across generations, literature had bridged a gap between us. If ever I doubted the power of a book to ignite something in the soul, everything that has transpired since has put that doubt to rest. As we come to the end of this episode, I find myself reflecting on what On the Road ultimately means to me, and perhaps to many of you. It's a story about yearning for discovery, for connection, for meaning. It's about that almost naive optimism that the next ride, the next town, the next person you meet, could change your life. Jack Kerouac and his beat friends weren't saints or superheroes. They were flawed humans fumbling their way toward truth, making mistakes, loving and hurting each other, burning brightly and sometimes burning out. But their sincerity in the search is what continues to inspire. There's a quote from Richard Feynman that I love. "Nobody ever figures out what life is all about, and it doesn't matter. Explore the world. Nearly everything is really interesting if you go into it deeply enough and go." In its own poetic, boozy, exalted way, On the Road encourages us to do exactly that. to explore the world and find fascination in its every corner. Whether in a jazz club in Chicago or a mountain vista in Montana, or a quiet moment with a friend on a long drive, the hope kindled by this exploration isn't a simplistic, happily ever after kind of hope. It's something more mature and enduring, a faith that even when times are tough or the world feels bleak, there is beauty and insight to be found by engaging with life fully, by hitting the road literally or metaphorically, and seeking out the mad ones, the illuminating experiences, the genuine conversations late at night. Before we part, I want to circle back to that image of Bear Mountain where we began Sal Paradise. Wet and frustrated, feeling like a fool for starting this journey. Little did he know the grand adventure that awaited or how it would define him. It makes me smile, because how often do we start something new? A project, a trip, a relationship? Feeling unsure, maybe even foolish on the road, assures us that it's okay to step into the unknown. Own. In fact, that's where the magic happens. The road ahead may be long, winding, and occasionally bumpy, but as long as we keep our spirit of adventure, we'll find our way. There's an old travel saying attributed to many, including Mark Twain and others. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. Whether Twain said it or not, and the sentiment fits. We regret the chances not taken, the open roads not traveled. Kerouac's legacy is urging us to take those chances, to live, to risk, to love, to go. In the end, what did Sal Paradise find on his road trips? He found stories. He found friendship and loss. He found the vastness of America. And ultimately, he found himself a bit older, a bit wiser, sitting by a river, thinking of his friend Dean and of the road that never ends. Sal settles down. The novel ends with him more rooted, listening to jazz with his love Laura. But he carries the road in his soul forever. Much like Jack Kerouac's On the Road, the manga and anime series One Piece has a special place in my heart. Both stories are driven by the thrill of exploration, the importance of friendship, and the indomitable hope that something incredible waits just beyond the horizon. Whether it's Sal Paradise, chasing the spirit of America, or Luffy setting sail for the Grand Line, both heroes remind us that life's greatest treasures aren't always what we set out to find, but the bonds we form, end quote. The journey we share. So perhaps I love them both for the same reason. They remind me that the world is vast, and hope is kindled with every step, every wave, every mile forward. I think the takeaway is that our journeys change us, prepare us for the next chapters of our lives. We integrate what we've learned and move forward. Next time, we step into darker waters, the kind that swirl when ambition, desire, and temptation collide. We turn to Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust, one of the most profound and enduring literary works of all time. And so, as I conclude this episode, looking out at the dusk, settling over the Hudson Highlands, I feel grateful. Grateful for the mad ones who have crossed my path. Grateful for the wide world that continues to call. And grateful for the hope that is kindled each time I remember that life is an open road, and I'm a willing traveler. Until next time, I leave you with the wisdom of those who have gone before us. Keep your eyes on the horizon and your heart full of curiosity. Remember Colin Powell, who advised in a wonderfully road-themed metaphor to always focus on the front windshield and not the rearview mirror. Look ahead to new adventures, new lessons, and new connections. Rather than getting stuck on what's behind, the journey continues, and so does the hope. Thank you again for riding along on this reflective trip with me. Stay well, stay hungry for life, and remember, the only people for us are the mad ones. Perhaps we are all a little mad in our own beautiful ways. The journey continues, and so does the hope.